We were talking this morning with Walter Day and a woman who did all the graphic work for Atari, and people were like, how long do you think this wave is going to last? The new, wave of arcade interest in games and everything else. And I said, well, it's going to last because everybody is so separated while they're playing their games and they're downloading in this world, but then they see it on social media, podcasts, people are YouTubing about the games, and this is our Halloween. This is our chance to get together for the Halloween party at school, meet all the other kids like you. So I don't think this is going to die. It's more of a cultural thing and a tradition thing that's already being passed on to, family and kids coming together. So I think like having everybody come out to Portland, to Milwaukee, to Phoenix, these shows, it's a party, man. And it's like gaming is the reason you're here, but you're here because this is your tribe, right? This is our tribe, man! Game tribe is awesome. You guys it's true, man, the nicest people in the world. It's like you completely forget about the bullshit political climate when you come out here. Everybody's so friendly, everything, except for this one dude, man. Fucking motherfucker.
There's always one, man.
But and what's cool is like we got into this whole field because we're creative types who didn't know how to fit in anywhere else. All of us. And so what do we end up doing? Like we make games. It's like when you're kid and you're screwing up, you're not doing the homework. You're gonna play games your whole life? Actually, I am. Actually, I am.
If it works out right, yeah. That's the plan, Mom.
Yeah, man. So we ended up playing games, and here we are, like meeting, all these great fans, and parents are bringing kids and everything else. You just see this joy and wonder, and like, hey, I had so many great memories playing with my brother, my sister, my best friend, And I think that's why this industry is just going to keep on rocking and rolling and getting stronger, because there's not a lot of other places unless you go to the church or the sporting events, which is kind of alienating. It's like that's not all inclusive. Like everybody can love so many games. You don't have to love just one team here. But you have to love the midway team more, right?
Of course.
But anyway, starting out informally, Paul Niemeyer, our iconic design for Mortal Kombat, he's going to tell you kind of his story, how he got in. And Paul and I decided we worked together in Phoenix the first time we ever met. Got along so well with Dan Pacina that we want to start to do more shows together. And we're finding out all these great backstories about not only midway games, but the finance and the game industry, like all these fun, dirty little secrets. So we're going to tell them the ones that we think we can. We know this is being recorded. But then want to more open it up to you guys, because like when you come by the booth, everybody has questions that we never think about, like you're probably curious about. So feel free at any time. There's no structure. We're just going to both kind of tell stories. And if you want to set us off in one direction and say, "Can you talk about this?" That's what we'll do. So with no further ado, Mr. Paul Niemeyer. Tonight's matchup, Paul Niemeyer and Mr. Boom Shakalaka. Here's the tip.
I feel like a dog act following the Beatles now. Jump, Fido, jump, you little bastard, jump! Oh my God, this has been a rocket ride for me. It really has. It all started back this last March when I dug out the old artwork from Mortal Kombat, and it turns out I'm the only one on the planet that has saved all that original artwork. They all threw it out. And as a freelancer, I saved everything. My wife said, "Why are you such a pack rat?" So now I'm pulling all this stuff out, and it's valuable, not a word, not a sound from her. In fact, now it's more like, could you go down and dig out some more stuff that seems to be really selling well? Oh, gee, honey, yeah. So, yeah, way back when, okay, how I got involved with Mortal Kombat in the first place. I have been in business 10 years. I worked for Valley Midway from 82 to 84, did a lot of games, Satan's Hollow, 3 Pac-Man games, worked on Tron, Tapper, Spy Hunter, Wacko, a lot of games. And then in 84, we all got the boot, and I went freelance, and I kind of ended up in advertising. And but I was still kind of playing around with games and screwing around with that. And, so now fast forward to 1992, Greg Ferris, who was my boss at Valley back in the day, was working on this new game, Dragon Attack. And he called me up and said, "Hey, come on down, we would love to have you work on this game." Okay. So how how that came to be was interesting story too. When they disbanded the art department at Ballet, they had all this stuff, and a couple of years after they did this, Greg called up everybody from the Ballet team to offer them the desks that we had. We had these cool desks, you know? And somehow I got forgotten because I was the midway guy. I was always like the midway guy, you know? They were the Ballet pinball gods, and I was the midway guy, you know? So I always kind of got forgotten about, or, you know, oh yeah, we should get him in on that too, you know? So he called up to offer desks to everybody except for me, okay? So now, a couple years later, Tony Ramone is going to move back to Italy, and he calls me up and he goes, and please sir, I'm not being racist, this is the way Tony, hey, boy, how come maybe you would like to have this, that he was here like forever, and he's still there, how come you, what's with the syntax, could you not get English right? Hey man, you're freaking forever. Okay, anyway. You know, would you like the desk that I got? I know you already got one too. I said, no, I don't have those. And so he's like, so he tells me the whole story. I'm like, I didn't get a phone call. So I'm like, yeah, screw him. I got a desk anyway. So I got this desk. Okay. So now a couple of years go by, and then Greg calls me up to bring me in for the Mortal Kombat. So we sit down for the first meeting, and we go through the whole thing. We get up, and I'm walking out the door, and Greg's standing at the door, and he goes, I hope this makes up for the desk. I'm like, and that's years later. I'm like, desk. Ding! Oh, the desk! So my smart-ass self goes, we'll see. I guess it worked out. So that's kind of how I got involved with Mortal Kombat.
And tell us some of the like big agencies and kind of touts you were at. That was pretty cool. Like Mortal Kombat, you were like Kellogg's and Tony Tiger and Candy and like all.
Right, that's the thing too. Is like my real life. It's like I had two separate lives. I was doing the video game stuff every once in a while, but my real life was I was premier illustrator for a lot of ad agencies up and down Michigan Avenue in Chicago. It was, you know, my biggest clients were Kellogg's and M&M Mars and Jack Daniels and stuff. But Kellogg's and M&M Mars, you know, nice, wholesome families. You know, Mortal Kombat was a shit show, you know. I mean, really, they came out, you know, I get a letter from the lawyers going, you may have to go to Washington to testify in front of a, you know, a hearing, you know, congressional hearing. Are you kidding me for a logo? Oh my God, I've made the big time. I'm going to Congress. I don't recall that, Senator. So I never went. That didn't actually happen. But you know, so here's kind of the thing. I don't know. Can I tell that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. At the end of the game,
you're relying on me for legal advice. Wow.
You had bail last night. I figured you would have, you know.
Oh, by the way, you mentioned Jack Daniels and M&M's in the same sentence, and they often go together at the end of a party. It's like Jack Daniels, chocolate cake, M&M, and beer. There's nothing like beer and chocolate cake, right?
You know, the beauty of those clients was like, in a recession, they do well.
Yeah.
In a non-recession, they do well. There was no not doing well with liquor and candy and cereal. And they're always going to sell the crap out of those things, man. So that was good. So, okay. So at the end of Mortal Kombat, when everything was done, we had a wrap-up meeting, and we were signing off on everything for production. And I said to Ed Boon, hey, you know, I kept the logo true to its kung fu, you know, origins, and I kept it facing left, you know, and I tried to be as traditional as possible. And I said, interesting, well, factoid. I just read that the ancient Romans used to believe that your sinister side was on your left side. So I think it's appropriate that it's facing left. And then there was like this long, uncomfortable pause, and he goes, you're really giving us a lot of thought, haven't you? What does that mean? And from that moment on, Mortal Kombat Dragon was facing to the right. And it's been facing right ever since. So, when I found out just recently, because I was a freelancer, it was just a way to keep it kind of out of my reach a little bit more, because I still had rights to it because I was a freelancer. If I'd been an employee, they'd have owned it outright. So, Game came out, exploded, it's huge. You know, I'm like, this is great. Called him up and I said, hey, you know, I'm blown away by this. Great job, unbelievable. I'm so proud to have been part of the team. And he stopped me. He goes, you really weren't part of the team. What?
Finish him!
Get over here!
Get over here! I'll drop you like a bugger hammer! Boom shakalaka!
You should punch mine out the whole time. This is good, man. I'm getting laughs and I'm not doing anything. Here, go. So he says this to me. I'm like, what? And he goes, well, where did you think you were part of the team? I said, well, probably all the meetings with the team. You know? It was a dead giveaway. I thought. I don't know. What do I know? And yeah, I was really kind of devastated by that. And he goes, don't get me wrong. I understand, you know, where you're coming from, but, you know, you're a hired gun. You know, you're a freelancer. You should be just happy getting paid. And this wasn't just him. That's an attitude across the board. No matter where you go, you're a freelancer. They just think you're a hired gun. You should be happy with pay. Get the hell out of here. You're done. Move on. And it was always something, I don't know, that always bothered me. 35 years of freelancing. You know, you pour your heart and soul into everything you do as if it were your very own. And, you know, to kind of have that attitude shoved at you, it's demoralizing. It was a little bit.
We're talking about how tough it is as a freelance person. You know, sometimes you get a good deal. You're working for the company, you're making X amount of dollars. They got rid of you. You come back as a consultant freelance, but you make double the money.
Double the money.
And you don't have to do the hours.
Like the next day. That happened to me. We were talking about this morning to Pam about the same thing from Nintendo. She said the same thing. They fired her, and then like a week later called her up and hired her freelance at double the rate. And I said the exact same thing happened to me at ballet. You know, everybody got the boot, and then they said, hey, you know, that job that you were working on before, you know, we really didn't finish it. Yeah, I know that. You fired me, remember? Oh, is that why that didn't get done? We were wondering. It's been sitting there for a while.
Yeah, there's so many interesting stories to, you know, artists and graphic artists, whatever, actors. You contribute to something that becomes huge. The guy who did the Chicago Bulls logo, you know, in the 60s, got paid, I think, between $50 or $250 for it outright. They bought it. You know, just a guy, graphic artist, didn't think to sign anything. He's never made a penny off that. Those sons of bitches! But they were winning those championships, and they're telling the story on air.
You know, this Great Bulls logo is done by a guy, Carl Dixon, out in Elmhurst. $50. $50. You know, 3 beers are $50. Give the guy $300 for Christ's sake. Something. So yeah, Paul and I, like, you know, connected to a big franchise. Why are you not on the team? We're slicing the pie. But it's like, if you guys saw if the music fans saw the Funk Brothers standing in the shadows of Motown, or the Wrecking Crew about, you know, the unbelievable band that basically played on every hit, you know, out of LA, and, you know, played for the Byrds and everything. You're a session musician, you only get what the session rate is. A union musician, you can play a #1 hit. So, you know, for my story, you know, I'm a young guy in Chicago going to Second City, trained as you know, classically trained at Purchase College. Thought I'm going to be doing Shakespeare classics around the country. Still would have loved that gig, you know, but that just didn't pay. And I had a son about 1985, so moved to Chicago, and he was growing up in Madison with his mom. We didn't marry, so it was kind of an unusual thing. Like, I moved from New York, but I want to be near him, and I go, you know what, I've always wanted to do Second City. I had an improv group in Albany, my own improv group, was making Betamax comedy videos in '81. Bought a $1,700 camera. I mean, how much $1,700 was in '81? This is the one you want, not VHS, no, Betamax.
Oh, you were
and it was the better system. That's the Atari, the Game Wars. But anyway, I digress.
And the people will see how good it is, and it'll become popular.
It was really good. It was a portable. You had that pack on you, and the handle, it was so convenient. I've got hours and hours of really fun and crazy videotapes that I am going to release someday. But the absolute, don't threaten me, absolute best days of my life, looking back, were before I had it all figured out. I thought I had some plans, ways I wanted to go, but while I was waiting for those things to happen, I went, well, stay busy. I was doing Shakespeare plays during the day at Albany, New York, in the park. Prince Hal, Romeo, and then I had my coffee house improv group. Then, you know, on the weekend I'd play drums in a band, you know, doing the comedy tapes. I mean, that was great. You know, there was no money. I paid $100 rent, split with 3 guys, $300 for a 3-bedroom. Money was never an issue. It's such a cool time in your life, you know, you're not buried with bills. So anyway, get to Chicago. You know, I'm going for Second City, and that's what I want to do. So I was there at the time. It was difficult to crack it. Never got on the main stage. It was, you know, 87, 88. It was Chris Farley and Steve Carell and Tim. It was everybody. Everybody's everybody now. And it was funny, like Steve Carell and I would audition together. We'd both audition for the host of the new Mickey Mouse Club. And Steve and I are out there like, this fucking sucks. I want to be the host of the Mickey Mouse Club. I want to be an actor. I was Prince Hal and Henry IV, Part 1, God damn it. You know, that would have been Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake and everything. My life would have been different. So you're also auditioning for commercials, and you go into and there's like 20 guys in there for a deodorant ad or a Bud Light thing. You're like, this isn't what I signed up for. But you do it because they all say, you got to get a reel together. Yeah, you got to get a reel together. And when parts for movies came to town, they'd throw a couple scraps, one-liners, like when The Fugitive would come to town, and et cetera. So I was always bummed I never got on the main stage. I was told, you're number 3 on the list. But the number 3 was under white Caucasian, leading man, blah, blah, blah. He goes, you got your fat guy, you got your black guy, you got your Hispanic. No, but then they, like, you know, the types at Second City, and they had very few women. There was always, you know, a great woman there. But how things have changed, like now it's diverse. It doesn't seem like they're hiring to just have that format, like Steve Carell or Stephen Colbert were like the guys that were ahead of me. So anyway, I wasn't bitter about it. I was frustrated. I just got to do something. So kept playing the drums on the weekend because I always wanted to be either a rock and roll star or an actor. And one of the guys in the band was responsible for putting sound and music in the pinball games, Chris Granner. And he said, you know, John Hay is looking for a guy to do Mr. Howell for Gilligan's Island. Can you do Mr. Howell? Can I do Mr. Howell? I'd rather do Ginger. Bend over backwards. You know what I'm talking about. So I go, how much does it pay to do?
I just brought a snare if I knew you were going to do pinball.
How much does it pay to do Mr. Howell in the grass hut? $50. So anyway, go in there, and they go, well, Gilligan, maybe we could ride Kona. Ooh, lovely. And I did my best, Mr. Howell, and that was that. And then they go, oh, now we're doing Popeye. Like, well, I'll try, you know. Oh, it's because he had, you know, whatever. Twilight Zone, they just kept coming, and I wasn't, it was weird because all the auditions for things that I didn't want, like deodorant commercial, I would have loved the money, but all these weird things, I'm getting stuff that's making me real happy, and I'm making $50 an hour. It was fantastic. And then John Hay goes, hey, Mark's working on a game, and once again across the street, like we were in the factory, the pinball guys, and the big kids were across the street and doing the video games. And they very rarely walked across the street. You know?
How am I going to have lunch with the cool kids?
Yeah, so he says, Mark Turmel's making this basketball game, and he goes, you know, what do you think? It was basically, that was it. What do you think? They did an audition, I go, fuck yeah, you know? And I found out later, and this is what a great guy John Hay is, a lot of people in companies and studios, game companies, use people, you know, for the voices. Mark Ritchie, Steve Ritchie, they didn't hire actors, but people who made the games, you know, are lots of characters. Mortal Kombat, we know that, you know. So actually, Mark Turmel said to John Hay, who does all the music for NBA Jam and producer, he said, hey John, why don't you do it? Do the voice for NBA Jam. He's like, yeah, Tim's be much better. How about that? The guy handed me a career like that, you know?
There's a lot of cowboy in those days.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like now, any games, there's like a team that's been assembled,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, to take a week or two to decide where to go lunch. You know,
Yeah.
back then it was like we need a voiceover. How about you? You want to do that? Okay. And really, and you step up and do it. That's already good. Use take 2. We're done.
Yeah. And the cool thing is you walk in, and it's on California and Belmont, Chicago. It's a factory 4, 5, 6 times the size of this room. All the pinball machines laid out. You're going by the conveyor belts. You go into this back nasty little hallway with 8-foot ceilings, drop ceilings, and fluorescent lights, and 1,000 cigarettes going in every office. Each office is like a small, tiny college single dorm room. You know, in the early computers with the green screen and the DOS and everything. And then a literal kind of like neat refrigerator. Yeah, the haze. And the recording
4 feet
booth.
off the ground.
The recording booth was not as big as most home refrigerators, double door refrigerator. I get in, have the little, you know, thing there. John had the script, you know, barked out our stuff, and it was the fun of like, you know, punk rock or garage band. Like, it was such a small group of guys in this giant place stuffed in this back room. No one knew really what we were doing. There was no real direction. Mark didn't come over and say, well, we want the audio to be like this. Like you're saying now, $5 billion EA Sports, 1,000 people have to be involved with everything. And, you know, there was just like, do what you guys want. It was total freedom. Like, no one was told how to make games. And that's just in general.
We're making
like,
how
to
to
make games. Like, Mark Timmel was not going to make an NBA Jam licensed game. He was going to follow arch rivals because they now had digitized technology to do, you know, the motion capture. He goes, oh, well, we should do one now because this is the new thing. Halfway through it, the president of the company, Neil Fidesz, said to him, he goes, well, this is going to be an NBA game, right? He goes, well, I didn't think we would do an NBA game because I thought you wouldn't be able to, you know, to be expensive, right? Because you got to do a fucking NBA license. It's like Mark was thinking, like, well, I'm just going to make a basketball. So it wasn't even going to be NBA. It wasn't going to be called NBA Jam. They didn't know what they're doing. It wasn't going to have high-flying dunks while they were just figuring stuff out, you know, like all of a sudden they, you know, just joking around, made the guy jump a little bit higher, and somebody like, it's funny, he jumped high. You know, he can jump a little higher, you know. Like, he jumped really high, I'm really high. Like, think he'll catch on fire. Yeah, he's on fire and he's on fire. And that's, I mean, it happened like that. They went out to Burger King for lunch one day and they go, you know, we got these flame graphics from Smash TV or something. Why don't we put that on the, like, so everything was literally just being made up like a band, like a song. Like, there weren't 5 meetings to do it, like, well, we can't have that, blah, 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 blah.
I remember going to lunch at this VFW that Pat Man loved. It was just this hole in the wall, but he had great Reuben sandwiches and burgers, you know. And then he had like these bored housewives that were dressed in negligees, you know, walking around. We're just
Chicago,
like,
man.
what the hell is this? You know?
Yeah.
But okay, but
Did they
here's
sell
what
you raffle tickets too?
Well, so here's where he gets his inspiration. I remember, have you ever seen Burger Time? The guy on the side of Burger Time, he was across the bar, okay? That was the guy that sat across the bar with a round nose, you know, and wait a minute, the gin nose, you know? Yeah, right. That's who's on the side of Burger Time, okay? So I used to tease him. I was like, oh yeah, you know, Da Vinci used to go down into the marketplace to draw, you know, the peasants. You know, this is our marketplace, right. And there's our peasant.
That's funny. Yeah. So we, you know, did all those games in that little tiny studio. In the movie, there's a film documentary coming out called Insert Coin, and Josh Sway, who's one of the artists there, and he was also a character in Mortal Kombat. He's a filmmaker now, and he's been working for like the last 4 years telling this story at Midway. And it really was this time of like, you know, Wozniak, you know, inventing Apple in his garage, whatever. Mark Timmel was offered a job from both Gates and Steve Wozniak. And he said, like, their first secretaries, he would have been like the 12th hire for the company. You know, their secretaries are millionaires. He goes, but I want to make games. You know, he turned them both down. See, he's this genius kid. They just let run in these back, you know, offices at Midway. So all that stuff is coming out. I just think it's so cool. It's like no one had any idea. They didn't go to school for this, you know. So we were all making it up until later. Like I'm making up the scripts. They didn't, you know, for Blitz and for, you know, all these other games and ad-libbing for this. Like we were just having a party. And then unfortunately, you know, the technology, like, you know, the Terminator caught up with them because they weren't getting ahead. And didn't have any plan for the home system, so they sold. Think of the gold that NBA Jam was, $1 billion in quarters. Well, it's like you know your Cadillac salesman. You sell an Eldorado, you know, to a pimp. It's like you make $6 grand, but how much money does he make off that? You know, his traffic, like the coins that are coming into that pimp's pocket, and the Cadillac. You're like, I want some of that money.
What an interesting assimilation you chose.
Midway wanted some of that pimp money.
It's like a pimp with an Eldorado.
So they had to sell the license to Acclaim for as much as they could get because you could only charge so much at the for a cabinet. You know, they tried to go like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 at a certain point. Like, no, we can't make money, you know, just selling the cabinet. So anyway, that was the beginning of the end. And you know, I had a nice run there. We did all the sports. I ended up doing, you know, hockey, baseball, football. The only guy who's ever done all 4 sports. And here I am, a guy, Second City, pinball, drummer, waiter, like, and I ended up having something just fall into my lap. But I was excited because I was always prepared to write, to do comedy, to perform. And it's like all the things came together: comedy, writing, performance. So I couldn't be luckier coming back from these conventions, realizing, you know, there was a hit show in the 60s or a hit song in the 60s, you know, 30 years later, 26 years later, we're having a resurgence which I have to equate in pop culture to if a TV show or a band, does the comeback tour. And we're just blessed. We're blessed to have, all you folks that, have fond memories. It was a good thing. It's like continues to be something that's a little bit different than, some of the games coming out now. That, we had our moment in time, and we're happy to be part of the community.
I kind of feel like I was the guy that played that like kick-ass lead on that song.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
nobody knows who played it.
Yeah.
It's like, but you can't hear that song without hearing that lead.
Yeah.
It's the iconic lead that and they built an empire around that lead guitar.
Yeah.
Who did that again?
Yeah.
Oh. That's me.
And graphically, like the great album cover, like the artwork, like the iconic covers that like you see, oh wow.
Right, that's so cool. Who did that? I don't know.
So I think like right now, I just would be interested if anybody has any thoughts or topics you want us to talk about or specific questions. So.
You've each talked about being freelancing for a long time and kind of assembling something versus maybe the kind of comfort of working for a company doing the thing for a long time. Can you just talk about the kind of forging your own way as opposed to latching on to something more comfortable, but maybe with a lower creative ceiling?
More comfortable. That's not a statement I would ever use describing art or being an artist or there's no more comfortable.
Well, I guess if I'm understanding your question right, you're asking like freelance as opposed to having something not as creative or challenging, but having a steady job or whatever. I think you were talking about that with Walter Day at breakfast. That it's always fun.
We're spoiled
to be that maverick.
Right,
have
right.
the freedom. Like you hired me as a consultant or freelance guy with me as a voiceover for what I do, not because I have to be part of your doctrine and whatever. Like you can't do it, so you brought in someone else. So it feels good to have that little bit of creative power.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate enough for people, as I said, to just go now. Oh, you do the script like Rage 2 even. They wrote some of it because they had their terminology. But otherwise, like with NBA Jam, with EA Sports or Mutant Football League, it's just like, that's yours. It's like to have total freedom is just crazy. So I would find it hard to work for a company to be, and I have friends who ended up, EA bought Black Box Entertainment from Vancouver when we did NHL Hits because it showed so well at E3, it actually upstaged their product at the time. So they said, well, buy those motherfuckers. They bought them for like $30 million or something, and all those guys got sucked into the EA cell, and I think every one of them left within 6 months. It's like, that's not like, we had this cool funky tower in Vancouver, and they were the first hipster, club that they did what they wanted to do, and suddenly they're under all this corporate stuff. So that structure can be good, depending on what you do, what your contributions are. Is it more mechanical or, technical driven? But, the real creativity, I think, exists in that place where, like, no one's really watching. As you said, at Midway, no one was really watching.
Exactly,
you guys are doing games, right? Okay, good.
Right, and the beauty of being a freelancer is like I just packed it up and I went home and nobody was looking over my shoulder. I do whatever the hell I want to, and I show up with artwork and I go back home and however it got from point A to point B is of no concern to anybody, which is fine by me because I've got my own way of doing things and I don't like to be told how to do it. I'm ruined for real work. I could not have a real job. I'd be gone in a week and a half. I have no filter. That fucking sucks. I'm not doing that shit. I'm like, you out. What does that mean?
Can you guys contrast the difference in production cycles from back in 1991, 92 versus what we have now, which is like the 2 to 6 year development cycle?
Oh, right, yeah. Do you mind if I...
Yeah, please.
Throw it in there? Oh, okay.
I have no idea what he's talking about. I just come in there and shout.
Well, okay. I'm going to abstractly just segue into something else that kind of had something to do with your question. While I was doing Mortal Kombat, 2 days later after I got the initial meeting with them, I got a call from Incredible Technologies, and they approached me with a game that they said, come on down, we're working on this game. We have our spies over at Midway who've told us about Dragon Attack. Really, do tell. I got it all over my studio, like, oh, more information on this. So I'm working on Time Killers. That was the game. What I did for that was I painted the backgrounds for the actual game, and it was kind of interesting that they approached it in a completely different way than the production. For getting back to your question about production, Mortal Kombat digitized or took pictures of all the combatants and digitized them and did the animation that way, and then created the backgrounds electronically. Time Killers did the opposite. They took digital pictures of the backgrounds and then created the combatants electronically. You know, and it changed the production schedule in a huge way. Now here's the problem. I am working on both jobs simultaneously, and I can't say anything about it because I got a non-disclosure agreement with both of them, right? So literally, one desk has Mortal Kombat, the other desk has Time Killers, and every time Mortal Kombat would bump up the production because they wanted to get it together, all I can say is that the guys had incredible technologies, must have had a really good spy, because the very next day I'd get a phone call from them going, you know, they're bumping up production over at Midway. I don't know who they got working on it, but he's killing it. It's me! But I can't say that. So, you know, I ended up hiring my buddy Rich Lowe to come and help with the backgrounds, because it's like, it's becoming a study in sleep deprivation at this point. They keep bumping up the scheduling. So, and it was really, it was just down to me. That was it, you know? And they didn't care how it got to point B. Again, they didn't care how, you know, how you did it, or if you didn't get any sleep, or, you know, it just has to be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's all that's about. And it was real artwork back then, you know, it was all hand-done stuff. There was no electronic anything. So when you get done with a job, you know, the messenger would be waiting at the door at 7 a.m. Yeah. And I actually did this. I opened my door once and crashed straight through the screen door. Yeah. Because I was, you know, you'd be up all night and literally packing it up as the guys were ringing the doorbell. Yeah. You know, you're in such a hurry. I literally ran right through my screen door. But again, you know, they didn't think anything about, you know, bumping up the deadline. You know, okay, we got to get this done. Let's go. Well, the production, let's hurry it along. And it was just not you or me to hire somebody and get it done. It was all about just getting it done and bringing it to, you know, the finish line. And now, you know, the productions are so involved, and everybody has to have a sign off on everything. And see, you're nodding, and yeah, there's 15 people on every, you know, little aspect of the project, you know, and all of them has to coordinate. They can't even decide where to go freaking lunch, for Christ's sake, you know. I don't know how any game gets produced. I really don't.
Well, maybe one of the differences too is back then, as I said, you know, we know that people didn't go to school to learn how to make video games, and there wasn't, you know, there weren't people who interned at it. So everybody's like, Mark goes, I'm good with programming, like, that's why he's a video game maker. So, but they didn't have, what I'm saying is they didn't have superiors and bosses and people at Midway that knew anything about anything except for money. Like, when's the game going out? What are we making? It's like, their bean counters, like, let the kids, you know, have their rock and roll band. That's what it was. It's like, so now it's like, it's the Beatles, with Sal Levita, you know, Mark Tamel, whoever is like, you know, that's their game. That little group, you know, and a few programmers. We're not talking about 20, 30 programs to digitize pixel by pixel every NBA player. They're the rock band, and they probably argue like the Beatles, Lennon McCartney, because Sal didn't want the ball to go on fire. He didn't want them to jump extra high because he wanted to be more realistic. And so they had to fight. And he said the happy medium and the compromise when you know, heating up and getting on fire and stuff was because they had that push and pull. It wasn't because some supervisor came in, hey guys, what's going on with this jumping too high and catching on fire bullshit? It's a fucking basketball game. And get back to work! You know? It was just two guys, you know, Lennon and McCartney arguing it back, and so it got to the happy medium because they're both artists and they both stood their ground. So now you have so many people that should have no business coming in and telling you about your business, and they're telling you about your business. So yeah, it's changed now. And it's like John Hay for NBA Jam, he did what literally 6 people did for EA when I was out there recording hits and everything. Did the music for the game, hired the talent, did the sessions, mixed the sessions, edited, got into the game, put the music, every last aspect of audio was his. And literally, when I do a session with EA, there are 6 or 7 people in the room. You know, like 3 guys with this, and 2 guys with scripts, and 1 guy's the mixer, and that guy's the audio engineer. It's like John did everything. It was like, it was amazing. So
it was bing bang boom. You know, it was like, okay, can we get this done this afternoon?
Yeah.
And that was
a lot of Camel cigarettes and coffee, and literally like 5 in the morning. They said all the time that the guys, you know, worked on the game. So
Oh, yeah.
Let's take Brad for a few more questions.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite underrated project that you worked on, and any new projects that you're working on?
Good question. I can't say that Slugfest is underrated because when it came out, I still got the reviews. There's never been a better audio review for any game ever done. And it was because there was enough technology to allow us to do things like begin speech, in the middle of an at bat, be talking about some ridiculous thing. The play happens and we would come back to the speech. We put in 50 or 100 improv sections while the screens are loading. So instead of just that quiet, or something, it's me and Jimmy up in the booth talking about pre-game stuff. So the humor, the writing, the content, people who love that game know that it's really special. So, but no one comes by the booth talking about or bringing their Slugfest game, or it's NBA Jam and Blitz. So that's the underrated one. And recently I just did Elvira's, the third installment. We did Elvira, Scared Stiff, and now Elvira's House of Horrors. So I'm the Count, and that one again, when the coffins are rocking, don't come a knocking, I'm getting nailed in the coffin tonight, baby! So, and then Deadpool just did the Dracula vampire character in there when you get the disco. So lots of fun stuff in Rage 2. And Mutant Football League, awesome. Got to write the whole script, do the characters. So I've been just blessed to keep working. Hopefully, meet more people at game developer conferences. So thanks, man.
So the NBA Jam remake for PS3, Xbox 360, the EA was responsible for. Who from the original team was involved with that? Because, from the audio standpoint, it sounds like you were able to kind of do your thing.
Well, Mark Turmel was hired by EA. I think specifically they wanted him once they decided to do NBA Jam, and he's the guy who all about the frames. Mark's all about the speed and the gameplay, and you can tell the difference between a Mark Turmel game and another game. There's an energy and a speed to it, and that's what creates that crack addiction. So he was working as more of a consultant. They had their team in place and producer, but so he was now a guy who has the experience. He was the guy who could come in and tell them about their business. I remember, he said he wanted to do a 60 frames. I can't go back there. But he was right. Now his boss did know what he was talking about.
Finally.
But yeah.
Finally.
But we had a different producer, Trey Smith, and he just said, do what you want. That's all. That was his thing. And one night I did about maybe 400 lines, and I'm a really shitty technological person with that computer and everything. I had no backup, whatever. Next morning, hit there to retrieve my word. It's gone. It was gone. Has anyone ever experienced that? There's some weird chemical. It's not adrenaline. I think it's just piss and shit. That's just going through. It's just. And I slowly went. It didn't happen. I'll just hit it again until it's nothing. And it said cannot retrieve or cannot refresh, whatever. All that work, because I work obviously in the moment. It's for block shots. I love when you call me Big Blocker. Like my wife says, not tonight. Like a fisherman's nightmare, he comes up with nothing but that. It's you just go off on these streams, doing jazz riffs and writing it down. It's the next morning, I couldn't remember 250 lines. And I had to take that moment and breathe and go, well, it came from the reservoir. There's got to be something more down there. And just got another cup of coffee. And so all the lines from that, it's cool. I never know if any of them were from the night before because I literally didn't remember any of them.
But isn't it funny? It's almost like there was a practice session.
Yeah.
But you kind of worked out all the bugs. And I got to think that, because I've had that happen too. You're working at 4 o'clock in the morning. You're thinking, I'm killing it. This is awesome. The next day you're going, oh. Fuck is that? What the hell was I thinking? This isn't even.
Yeah.
Right.
So a question for Paul.
Yes.
What pieces did you work on for Slider and Satan's Hollow specifically? Just curious.
Oh, what pieces did I work on for?
For Slider and Satan's Hollow.
Oh, okay. Satan's Hollow, I did everything. And that was, I really gotta thank Paul Ferris, who's just an awesome boss. He was the best boss I ever had in the world, just the greatest guy. He was a high school teacher before he was, the head of ballet pinball. And after he was done with that, he went back to high school teaching. So anyway, he had faith in me, and it was tough because they brought all the pinball gods over when they blended our two art departments, and basically the art department midway was me and Larry, who did the production art. So I was really the only creative in the bunch. So again, a lot of that separate, I was separated from the rest of the bunch. So now they're all coming over here. I'm thinking, I'm never gonna get a game in my, at this point. I had high hopes, but I see these guys coming. That's the end of that, Paul believed in me. And he came and gave me that game, gave me Satan's Hollow, and I did all the artwork on that. I was 24 years old. I was, a noob, but he had faith in me. And that I can't tell you how incredibly inspiring that was, that he had that faith. And it was so cool because I remember he just gave it to me like very matter of fact. Here, work on this. You got this. And I'm like, oh my God, Paul Ferris thinks I got this. Holy shit. I must have it. He thinks I have it, Now, Spy Hunter, I worked with Doug Watson on that. And basically, it's mostly his stuff. I did the control panel on that. And a couple other production things, So that was kind of my job at Bally. After the Bally guys came over, I got what I thought was being saddled with doing every stupid, game that came along that they wanted to just throw some graphics on to, prototype to get it out there in the arcade and see, play test it. So that's what I did. I did probably hundreds of headers of games that we just made the name up on the spot and just, shove something in there and then throw it out in our test arcade. So, and I kind of resented that for a little while because I thought, I don't have a game title that I could, put on.
Shark balls. Okay, put it on there.
But in the big picture, what it ended up doing was it gave me incredible skill sets that I took to the advertising world and just kicked ass. Yeah, I was the fastest wrist on Michigan Avenue. I mean,
Hey.
You were pretty fast too, but I think we're talking about two different things here.
We're in a wrap-up time. So
Very clean here.
One more quick question, and then stop by. I think I've seen every face here. I'm over at 615. Paul's at the front. So stop by if you have any other questions. So let these guys get to the next thing. But do you have one more question? Was there someone? Yeah.
Paul, what do you think of the new Mortal Kombat logo for the movie?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a great question. I like it. I think there's a nod to the old one, but I'm surprised that they decided to do that. Usually, we've got a popular franchise like that. Don't screw with the logo, But at this point, it's like too big to fail, So I mean, even if it sucked ass, it would still be cool. People would still go see it. But I don't know. I like it. Change is good. I'm always up for dicking around with stuff. It looks good. Let's poke around with it some more. So that's kind of what that is. Poking around with it some more. So yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah.
Time is winding down at the buzzer. No good. And we're gonna we'll be up front. Thank you.
Flawless victory.
Thank you, guys.